Hello and welcome to another optional extra video. I'm Mitch and joining me is Russell because we're taking a look at Gambit, an action platformer that's basically a 2D Souls game. You can get Gambit on pretty much every platform, but not at the moment because you can get it on PC and PS4. And to get straight into it, into our initial thoughts, I really like the game. The gameplay feels really solid and the style of the game is really good, like graphics and sound, it all works together. The boss fights are the definite standout for me because they give you exactly what Dark Souls gives you, which is just like exhilarating fights, and I really can't wait to get back to playing more of this once I'm done with the latest World of Warcraft expansion, which is consuming all my time. Yeah, I've played it for about just over an hour and I really like what I played.
Well, I played it a bit more than that. I definitely agree with those sentiments. Like, it being a Souls game, like, the bosses have to be the enjoyable aspect, and I think they all nailed that in the sense of each one feels creative and also challenging, and that's what you want. You want it to have that repetitive loop of, like, having to, like, challenge this boss and having euphoric accomplishment after actually beating them, and they achieved that, as well as the other thing you mentioned, like the visuals and the gameplay and whatnot.
Do you recommend people play Gambit?
At the moment, unless you are playing WoW, as Mitch's case, there's a reasonable breath of air between like games right now. So I think if you haven't been picking up quite a few of the other, this is Metroidvania, but other Metroidvanias right now, seemingly coming.
We've also been covering.
Yeah, true. This is a game you should pick up, and I think judging from where I am right now on like the boss deflation, I'm thinking it's probably somewhere in the 10-hour range. Is probably how long it takes to win it. Maybe. I guess it depends on how bad you do or how good you are. But I think I'd recommend it. Yeah.
I think I'd recommend it for if you're a fan of Dark Souls or other Metroidvanias. I mean, this isn't a Metroidvania, but like if you enjoy games like Hollow Knight, I mean, a big one stands out, that's Salt and Sanctuary, which did go for this. I think Salt and Sanctuary was not as good as this.
Salt and Sanctuary is definitely like the best comparison, where it's like I think this is a better version of that game, where it's like it's trying to do what Salt and Sanctuary did, but better.
If you enjoyed that and all this, like, you'd enjoy it. Like, I enjoy it because it gives me everything I love in games, and I love a good boss fight. And so now we're going to jump straight into that point of how good the bosses are, because, we both said it just then, and I think it's worth reiterating because from the little I've seen with all the bosses, it does give you that Souls experience, but in a different dimension, you could say.
They've adjusted it a little bit as opposed to other games which basically just copy like the Dark Souls, like here's a big boss you've got to beat. They almost more rewarding for failure. Like it's not quite as bad as like you just have to keep going at it until you can beat it. They do give you like a percentage of the experience of the health bar you've been managed to take off, which is quite cool.
Yeah, that is a neat thing that I haven't seen them do before in like this kind of game, and I think it does a few things different where it actually tells you when another phase is going to start, which is, it's interesting to like, okay, now I can work out ahead of time, like this, okay, I'm going to get it over the line, what's next? And then
it's almost got like a Mega Man-y type vibe, but very that choreography type aspect of it, but it's still unclear what's going to happen. But they definitely assist you, like as you said, sometimes they have like death moves and they like put skulls on like every spot a death move is going to happen, so get the hell out of that location.
You can kind of tell what they're going to do ahead of time, which is always good for a boss to kind of give you that visual identifier of like, okay, now they're going to do something serious. It's still punishing when you die because you basically drop an Estus flask.
That's also where how like it adjusts itself, where it's like you do drop, rather than dropping your souls, which is used as like the upgradable experience, you drop your Estus flask, which can continually drop if you don't pick it up, and it stays where it is. So if you like drop it off on one boss and then go to the next boss, it's the other one's still that boss, and if you die on that boss, it'll leave one of that boss too. But it's not super punishing because that does entice you to want to beat that boss, but even if you just can't because it's too challenging, which there definitely is some bosses they bait you to do and then go, oh, this is a mistake.
Yeah, we both fell for that one. If you go the wrong way, you pay for that.
With a very, very strong knight boss flying thing, it's a very OP. But yeah, it's that payoff, and then if you screw up, you can recover by paying a certain amount of your souls. If it gets too out of control, you can just recover all your feathers, is what they're basically Phoenix feathers, and that's the Estus flask.
Yeah, and because you're not losing your souls or whatever they're called, you can just you can get that back pretty easily, especially later on when I imagine the rate of how much you get back is increased.
Even that can be used in interesting ways because you get permanent upgrades as you play through the game, that how many you can hold of that item, the healing item, but you can actually, if you go, you know what, I only need 3, and then let's say you've got like 5 or something, you can actually turn those Estus flasks, which are called feathers in this game, to to be damage bonus. Like you can go, now I do 120% damage all the time because I'm not able to equip that many feathers.
I love it when games give you a good risk and reward like kind of system. Like you can have it on you so you can last longer, or you could just go full damage, do way more damage, and get through it and be like a way that kind of rewards you for successful dodging, parrying, and blocking, which is all a part of this game as well.
Yeah, and speaking of which, like how that connects to like your initial player choice. I don't know what you picked, but I'm always a strength guy, so I went for Sentinel, which had like the benefit of like being able to equip half, I believe, of any equipment type. So if there's like a sword that it needs like 7 strength, I think you only need like 4 strength to actually equip.
Maybe I'll restart.
What did you go with?
I went with the Blood Knight because I'm like, it sounds like Bloodborne,
the Bloodborne
like thing. I don't feel I'm getting much benefit out of it because I feel like I take damage and I'm just not making back. So maybe I'll go Sentinel because that sounds very.
The sound of the title was like Acolyte of Death, and he's got like a giant scythe. And the ability was weird though because it was like you can rebirth death statues, which are basically bonfires. But I haven't seen like broken death statues anyway. So my understanding, maybe they only appear if you place the Acolyte of Death, and then you can bring them back or something.
But it is interesting how the start is just like reeks of Dark Souls. Yeah. Like pick a starting class, choose an item. Can't make your character though because you're playing as, I forget his name. You know,
the intro itself is really cool too because like the aspect of like you've died, there's like a giant polyp of balls, you get up, and then Death signs you a contract. Death looks so badass in this game too.
He does. I love how it looks.
He gets you signed a contract that literally makes you immortal, and it builds like story narrative context for like the entire thing. Where it's like why you are an immortal because of this dealing with death.
It's pretty fascinating. Before we get into all the story now, I kind of want to talk about like how the weapons feel. Like I don't know how many weapons you've used and how different they feel, but I've just used the axe. I'm just curious what further ahead it's like.
So the Sentinel has a long sword, which is basically just like the Buster Sword or something. It's a massive sword, and it's slow, but it does a lot of damage. But it's not fast. But it's the negative of it is its combos are very slow. So it's like you can only like hit, and then if you're not backing out or like killed it by that point, which you often do because you're so strong, it's like you've used all your stamina and whatnot. Because yes, there is a stamina meter, aka Dark Souls. In this game.
And the stamina meter plays a very important part of this game because, like Dark Souls, every dodge, every roll, every block, every attack. At the moment, I'm feeling very stamina starved, which is something that I think you feel in Dark Souls as well early on, which. Later on, it starts to feel better, but it's like, overall, it's very much a Dark Souls and how it plays and stuff.
And what's cool about the weapons is that not only do they feel uniquely different, like the combos and stuff you get. You're saying axe. I haven't actually used the axe, but I've used the Great Hammer, which is like this hammer, I think the slowest weapon in the game, but it does an absolutely crazy amount of damage. But what's really cool about the combat is how these special abilities that tie into the weapons you choose.
Okay, so they're tied to weapons.
Yeah, and I didn't notice it until I started to equip. Initially, you get like a bow as your secondary weapon. Eventually, I got rid of it and started using the Great Hammer as my secondary weapon.
Oh, you can do that.
And
awesome.
And then realized that the ability you can't use like the the long sword's abilities, which are incredibly powerful and like what you want to be doing in combat all the time is like building up combos, which is basically just attack, so you can trigger those super strong abilities. And it really has a nice flow to it when you suddenly connect multiple weapons together with multiple abilities, and then just like charging it up in combat in a boss battle in particular, where you're building it up and like trying to starve off the attacks as long as possible so you can trigger these things to hopefully kill them as faster.
Like, the gameplay is excellent, the bosses are excellent, like the mechanics are they've nailed all of it, and I think another thing they've nailed is how the game is visually put together, because I mean it's another pixel art style, but like you can see that all these developers have their own unique way to do it. This one's very like scale is very big, so really zoomed out, and like I really love how this looks.
I completely agree. I think it looks excellent, and scale is a really big factor because there are at least 2 bosses I've seen right now that are massive, and they scale that like really pan out to show you how big this thing is compared to you. And it's also like it's got this like aspect of being like kind of violent in a pixel style. Like there's like open chests and blood dripping out of characters and stuff. So there's one boss in particular I won't spoil, but the way it opens with that boss is like very violent, and the entire arena is like just bodies everywhere. So very cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
I love the like dark fantasy. Like this game's really going for
exactly.
like Berserk, Dark Souls, like if more
which
bloody.
inherently are like tied together anyway.
They're really going all out with that kind of look to it,
Yeah, and the music that complements it, where it's got these big harmonies and also just dark, alluding, like kind of depressing music for like sections too. Like how it like represents the locations you're exploring is keeps like the vibe and atmosphere of this game together in one piece. Nothing feels like that off.
No, yeah, I think the atmosphere and like the vibe of the game is very like, I love it. I love how this game feels, love how this game looks, and presentation-wise, they really nailed that.
And then like how that story ties into that with like the aspect of Death's Gambit, because you're dying all the time. It's like the only game I've seen where it's like they actually go to the efforts to explain what dying means and what's happening when you die. Like they've got full-on like cutscene connecty things where it's like you die and you go to the underworld basically, and you're like seeing your past as a kid, talking to your mother, and like she left to the battlefield and like your biggest regret and all this kind of stuff.
Never to return, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. And it is cool they're putting the extra effort in to like explain why you're exactly doing this. Like why are you immortal?
Yeah, because of the fact you're not creating a character, this is a character.
Yeah, exactly. And that's interesting. It's probably the only thing that's actually bothered me at all right now is that they have voice acting for all the characters. Very good voice acting for an indie title in particular, and surprising, like the amount of actual lines of dialogue there are for all the characters.
I mean,
you
just
meet.
quickly butt in, it's like it's published by Adult Swim Games, so you know they would have a background of like voice actors and stuff. They would have more access to.
That's true. Yeah, they've got them on call, so they bring them in. But the only thing that surprised me is that the character you are doesn't ever have any dialogue, but they still speak. You know, they show their text bubble. All I can imagine, it's one of those things where they go, oh, but if you put a voice on it's the Zelda situation. If you put the voice on Link, then you're not playing as Link. You're like, you should be embodying him, and if they give him a voice, it's not. So that's all I can think of as the case.
When you read that, you're reading it as the character is kind of the way they wanted to push that forward.
Just because they put the effort with all this voice acting for all these other characters that distinguishly, and they have quite a few lines, and then you just say something blank, like nothing happens. It's like, I kind of wish he said something.
Most people are playing for the gameplay, which is true with Death's Gambit, but they did want to push like our own spin of how this all works, because you know it's an interesting thing to explore in a game such as this.
I'm definitely like one of the areas I just encountered. I'm super interested to see what is going down in that location, because it was surprising to find it, and I'm more interested in finding out why that exists in this universe to begin with. So I'm excited for that, and I definitely. This game has that. There are some surprises, and the bosses, I think, are the biggest ones. Was like when the bosses show up, you go, "Oh, this is badass."
Yeah, that's been our look at Death's Gambit. If you enjoyed this video, you can hit that like and subscribe buttons that you know to do on YouTube that everyone keeps telling you to. I'd like to thank Russell for joining me, and yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.